One of the most beguiling UK debuts of 1976 was by the Scottish six-piece Cado Belle, fronted by the lily-voiced Maggie Reilly. And from their self-titled debut album, the track Infamous Mister. Okay, already we've got the set up with lovely, some major seventh chords, really slick guitar, smooth harmonies, that really feminine voice flaring up, and, you know, pauses, kind of call and response between instruments and vocals. Good going so far.
If a cat fits, you've got to wear it. You know that I just can't bear it. When you come to me with some other disguise, expecting me to see stars in your eyes.
Okay, yeah, lovely voice. Let's see what, this is kind of about a Casanova player type, a smooth talker. Okay, Infamous Mister. If the cap fits, you've got to wear it. You know that I just can't bear it. When you come to me with some other disguise, expecting me to see stars in your eyes. Interesting. So he's always trying to be a charmer. He's always trying to put on an act. He's always trying to be whoever he thinks the person he's addressing wants, would ultimately be, you know, taken by. Yeah. He's putting on different acts to charm different types of people. Hear that octave bass line scaling. Yeah, okay. We learn a little bit more about the character. Okay. It seems you're always out there flying before the rest of the crowd starts trying. Changes all the time just to keep yourself alive, tangled in the knots that you're tying. I love the turn of phrase, the metaphor, the succinct phraseology in these couplets, quite original couplets too, and how they managed to say a lot. They managed to convey a lot of the plot of the character in just without being too wordy or too descriptive about it. Okay, that chorus. Dressed to impress, you're a cut above the rest. You always try to keep one step ahead. Okay, the word ahead is kind of muted. It's not quite felt in the cadence anyway. I always just take it as you always try to keep one step. But they say ahead on this lyric sheet, so that must be kind of the unspoken part. Yeah, okay. Infamous Mister, no one knows how hard you try, because you always keep a finger in the pie. I love the way Meggy Reilly just flares up on the word pie. It was such wide, like high octave, like effervescence and femininity and just emotion she's charmed by this guy despite trying to be somewhat of a voice of reason in all this, despite trying to put things into perspective. You can tell she's kind of swept off her feet by this guy. Oh, I love that electric piano tinkling here and there, just breaking in certain bits.
I just can't take it. The way you always seem to fake it. Once I thought I knew what was going on with you. Now I just don't know how you always come through.
Oh, that just kind of orgasmic, airy quality in her voice, yeah. There are times I just can't take it, the way you always seem to fake it. Once I thought I knew what was going on with you. Now I just don't know how you're always coming through. So this guy is like a man of mystery, almost like a James Bond going on. I'm imagining going on adventures and like defying death here and there, and just always coming out just you know like clean suit and slicked back hair, just like nothing happened, like just shaking it all off, really debonair. Yeah. And her just her knowing that this is all just like a nutty sequence of events out of some movie, but and trying to put things in, trying to put it all into perspective at the same time, just still being swept up in it all, just taken by this guy. Okay, some really period lines that convey a lot of imagery here. Okay, maybe you think that you're losing. I used to think she was saying baby right there. When you're not up at the front and cruising. Okay, that was one I always misheard as when you're not out at the bar and cruising, or something like that. Like I'm picturing like kind of like a 70s era swinger, bar hopper. I'm picturing I would always picture like 70s nightclub imagery of like a guy in a leisure suit, like making kind of seductive looks at women, kind of, and charming women, chatting them up. Like Super 8, footage, Super 8 grainy footage, glowing lights amid a dark background, strobe lights, the whole 70s, like out of any period movie, pre AIDS sexual inhibition, pre serial killer trust in strangers. Yeah. So slick. Once again, that beautiful swelling chorus and all. I would say for a 1976 recording, while it invokes its time, it could also just as easily sound as if it was made like in the early 80s. Okay, maybe the bass line, that octave bass line you wouldn't have in it. But like I'm hearing like kind of elements of like what Quarter Flash were doing 5 years later. Some of like Valerie Carter's second album, Wild Child, well that came out in 78, but that also had kind of like an early 80s sound in places. Some of the like early 80s West Coast, I'm hearing like a precursor to like the early 80s kind of smooth jazz pop UK US project, Eye to Eye. Yeah, that was like a UK duo, a follow through to Marshall Hayne, that was recorded with American musicians. It was recorded with like Steve Katz, Rick Derringer. Yeah, a whole kind of like West Coast mealing with the some of the Steely Dan people. Yeah. So basically, I'm hearing quite a bit of like early '80s sophista smooth pop in this. I could even like the Manhattan Transfer could have sounded like this in places like on Mecca for Moderns around that time period. That really tight, persistent drumming. Let's meet some of our other guys on here. Meggy Reilly, as a lot of you know, went on to become the vocalist for Mike Oldfield, and her voice was heard on Moonlight Shadow, on the original Family Man, the Mike Oldfield version that a UK hit that Hall & Oates made more internationally famous soon afterwards. 5 Miles Out, the title track. Some of the songs on Discovery, yeah. Continued to like sing for him, was quite prominent on his albums from like 5 Miles Out in 1982, Crisis in A3, Discovery, and a bit beyond that too. She may have actually been on the 1980 album QE2. I can't remember. Yeah, I think a different female vocalist though was on Platinum. Yeah. Let's see. Bassist Gavin Hodgson. Let's see. He would later 19 credits according to Discogs. Oh, has appeared on some of Meggy Riley's solo material. Although she didn't really start recording solo until the early 90s, it looks like. I gotta just say, what is it with the name Maggie and Scottish women? Is that kind of like a more common Scottish female name? A more common female name in Scotland, at least among that generation, because the two Maggies I can think of right offhand in the music industry, Maggie Reilly and Maggie Belle from the Scottish roots rock band Stone the Crows. And Maggie Belle was recording solo around the time of this Cado Belle album, yeah. And would later resurface in the band Midnight Flyer in the early 80s. Very different voices, though, those two. Yeah, you couldn't mistake them. Like, Maggie Reilly, very smooth, very lithe, very feminine, high octave. Maggie Belle, more of a belter, more of a gruff, kind of like tough, kind of saloon type chick. Kind of more in the Elkie Brooks vein of vocalists. Let's see here. Drums, Davy Roy. And just 3 credits according to Discogs, like a few other, one, on one title that appears to be Welsh, actually. And guitar, Alan Darby, giving us those slick, light licks there. 97 credits according to Discogs. A lot of, I guess, solo stuff starting in the 90s. What did he do band-wise? Oh, Leslie McKeown during the 1980s. Wasn't he... Yeah, Bay City Rollers. So he was involved in the vocalist. He played on the Skids' 4th album, Joy, yeah. When they became like a total like Celt folk band. Yeah, after Stuart Adamson left. Oh, he was in Fashion for a time. That's interesting. And on some like later Colin Blunstone recordings. Oh well, I could go on and on. Let's get back to the song. That magical mid-70s flute solo, like in a slick kind of R&B pop song. And that probably really anchors this to the time period, but it's magical nonetheless. It takes you... and also notice the really clean, clear production on this album. And you got to admire that, especially for like a band... a Scottish band, like in the mid-70s, kind of that didn't necessarily have a superstar budget behind them. Released on Anchor Records, yeah, and produced by... I'll find that in a bit. Oh, I love that scaling solo with those high licks, those high bends in there, like on that one choice chord, like when it hits no. Yeah, when it hits the flat, when it hits E flat. Yeah, that is like one of the choice chord progressions in the song. Yeah, and then the guitarist hits that high note, that like that over the flat. Yeah, one of the most compelling like instrumental moments in the song. This album is produced by Keith Olsen, quite an American producer actually. That might explain it. This is like, yeah, because this is like one of the cleanest recordings of the time period. It's one of the reasons why it kind of sounds like it possibly could have been made in the early 80s. Yeah. harmonies on this are just so well arranged. It's like, who is harmonizing here? It only credits, well, I'm just going to assume it's like several of them. It doesn't say who's singing backup vocals. Keyboards on this album, giving us those light Fender tinkles and such. Stuart MacKillop, who, well, went on later, like more than like 16 years later, to back up Maggie Reilly on her solo albums. And, was on a 1979 album, Ritz, by putting on the Ritz. Yeah, I don't think I've worked through that title. Another, like, disco. Got so many, disco kind of one-offs in the late 70s with names like, that. That looked like, that seemed like they were borrowed out of, like, a 1930s Bugsby Berkeley movie or something. Yeah. Oh, that trade-off between that light guitar lick and the piano. Yeah, each instrumentalist, it seems, taking just a little moment to shine over kind of like a really open-ended but kind of slick, tight structure. Yeah, just a perfect song, like, for like the soundtrack to any like kind of cruisin' playa type character, especially in this like period. Anything set in this period, it would work right now, in a movie that contained like a 70s era playa type smooth talker type character, in that more kind of sexually adventurous, you could say naive, innocent time period. The period when there were no deadly sexually transmitted diseases, and also the period when there hadn't quite been the precedent yet of like mysterious slayings in the news, like the phenomenon of serial killers. You sometimes wonder if certain serial killers getting publicized so much back in the day kind of led to the whole upsurge in stories during that decade. Like there was this one guy I was talking to in LA who told me that how the 70s were, and this was a pretty religious guy. He was telling me, oh, back in the 70s, the way it was, you would slow dance with a woman and take her home. But then, of course, there were the Hillside Stranglers, there was Ted Bundy, and those stories just ruined all of our fun. There was the whole looking for Mr. Goodbar, and the message, and rightly so. It was a good message that film. It was a cautionary tale, and I bring this up because in Scotland, just a year after this was recorded, there was the story of the World's End killings, I think they were called, where two teenage girls were at a pub, the World's End pub, I think, in Edinburgh, and they took a ride. They accepted a ride to a party that they were going to with some shady guy, and that's the last they were ever seen. And like a few days later, their bodies were found like by the river somewhere, and that crime was not solved. The person, I guess it was like a serial killer. What's his name? Sutcliffe or something. He was finally convicted of the crime. The guy behind it was a serial killer who was ultimately apprehended in 1982, but he wasn't convicted of that crime until 2014. Strangely enough, when I first learned about that case, in a back issue of like New Musical Express or Sounds, or maybe Record Mirror that I obtained in 2003, and I was reading this article about a Scottish band, I think The Table or The Valves or something, and it mentioned that incident had just happened, and I found that a really disturbing story at the time, and several years later I was flipping through that issue again, and I decided to look up the case on the internet. This was in 2007, and it turned out the wheels were just starting to turn on solving that, which was by then a 30-year-old unsolved crime. And supposedly they were mounting a case in 2007, but it was ultimately thrown out in court for flimsy evidence or whatever. But ultimately it was brought back, and ultimately the person that they were hoping to press charges on was convicted of the crime in 2014. Yeah, about time, that they solved that, Anyway, I guess one of the worst crimes and one of the longest unsolved cases in UK history. By the time it was finally solved and justice was finally given to those, victims and their families. Let's hear another song from the Cado Belle album, the ballad "Rock to Stony Silence." Okay, lavish, full strings, somewhat kind of their own sound, really. Like, one could say influenced by Philly, but the sound is much cleaner. I would almost say fuller, almost more kind of like stereo surround sound. The Boz Scaggs influence you could kind of hint at, but almost like a combination of like Tom Bell and Andrew Powell, more of like a transatlantic type orchestration going on. Beautiful minor keys. Okay, I think we went from C minor to B flat major 7.
Just ignore me when I pass you. Although you stop and talk a while, you turn away. Yes, I'm listening to you. I try to force a smile.
Okay, notice how her voice is just kind of flowing and just almost kind of like wavering softly over different chordal landings, and we're going through some minor keys, some flats, some major 7ths, just all beautifully juxtaposed. And
You're like a flame that's burning up inside. I feel it when you talk. Though I try to understand your mind, there comes a time when I must know.
oh, that guitar ascent right there, just that kind of like, two notes like scaling upward like that, and that the final 2 chords in the verse sequences are the most beautiful when it goes up to that like flat major 7th and then down, and the way her voice pivots on it. Let's catch up to the lyrics in this song. You just ignore me when I pass you, although we stop and talk a while. You turn away as I'm listening to you. I try to force a smile. This kind of has like sort of a rainy day, kind of like a cloudy day type vibe to it. It almost isn't the right time of year for this, but oh well. You're like a flame that's burning up inside. Yes, I feel it when you talk. So she's kind of in love with this guy, kind of infatuated with this guy, and he's somewhat standoffish and indifferent. And though I try to understand your mind, there comes a time when I must stop. Maybe this guy is kind of disturbed and somewhat different. Who knows, maybe he's kind of like a male version of like the woman I was dealing with a couple years ago, the woman from my 20s. The dream woman of my 20s that I tracked down on Facebook and ultimately ended up dating for 2 months, 18 years after my initial crush on her.
I'm right to stone silence. I just can't communicate in a one-way conversation where there's nowhere we relate.
Okay, and I'm rocked to stony silence. That's quite a powerful metaphor. Yeah, it's basically like she's just frozen by her inability to, by her disappointment and inability, like despite her best effort or her best intentions going in, that after a few minutes of talking to him, she finds, I can't go anywhere. There's just nothing. And I relate to that. Yeah, that was kind of a similar experience I was having just 2 years ago now. Yeah. In a one-way conversation where there's nowhere we relate. Yeah.
I'm rocked to stony silence by the things you think and say. Oh, it is all too surprising if you could see it round my
Oh, those scales, like taking turns, like the piano, electric piano, and then the soft guitar.
I see it everywhere in action. It's all around like some disease. You've got courage, self-protection. I know that that's what you believe.
That key production, chord progression right there. Yeah, the most compelling part of the verse. Yeah.
And where you stand, it's just confusion. You never step outside the dance.
Oh, I love the way that her voice is kind of like hitting those high octaves, like restrained. How some of the words are not necessarily staccato, but they're rather closed, kind of syllable, and then certain other words she'll sustain the vowels a bit, depending on whether you're depending on which way the chords are moving.
You can't escape certain conclusions, and you assume them in advance.
The way that guitar figure just flowers right out of the rhythmic component of the track. And notice also, I had to comment on the bass figure of the verses, like that boom, 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 chirp. The guitar like just hitting like the end of every bar, like chirp, like that.
Now by the stony silence, 'cause you think that you've got free from all the old conventions, but they still hang round your sleeve.
Okay, I have to catch up on the lyrics here. I see it everywhere in action. It's all around like some disease. You might call it self-protection. I know that's what you believe. From where you stand, it's just confusion. You never step outside the dance. You can't escape certain conclusions when you assume them in advance. Huh. This is pretty loaded in terms of metaphor. You might call it self-protection. I know that's what you believe. So this person's like self-limiting beliefs and lack of inability to think positively. Self-sabotage might be his way of protecting himself against disappointment from over failure, fear of failure. Yeah, I kind of recognize that tendency. From where you stand, it's just confusion. You never step outside the dance. The dance, I guess, being his own circular set of habits. You can't escape certain conclusions when you assume them in advance. Okay, that is brilliant. Yeah. You'll always be bound by your own fears and limitations as long as you presuppose them in advance of even trying and seeing what the results of action and effort might actually yield. Yeah, that's perfect, and it's a perfectly succinct way to put what I just said into words, and into measured bars and couplets that really fit the verses well. And I'm rocked to stony silence 'cause you think that you've got free from all the old conventions, but they still hang around your sleeve. So this guy might be trying to free himself from disappointment by avoiding risks, by avoiding experience, and perhaps by avoiding people altogether.
I'm brought to Stony Silence, 'cause you say you know what's real. It doesn't look so obvious when you don't know how you feel.
Oh, that was like, you see, a perfect syllable to be stretching out like that. Yeah, the word feel, because that's the mournful side of her. That's the regret. You know, she wishes she could turn this person around, but she knows at this point that she won't probably be able to in the foreseeable future. Oh, appreciate those lengthy lyrical sustains that our guitarist is giving us. Yeah, Alan Darby. Yeah, showing his work on this album has been kind of noted by people who are familiar with this album. As a matter of fact, they even though this was their only album, they did do an EP the following year. The Cado Belle EP, and his guitar licks on a instrumental track called September has been like cited as like an exceptional moment of musicianship in the band. And so he's gotten his recognition as a player. Yeah. Make it cry, make it sing, make it soar. Oh, hear the strings, the lushness just swelling up even more than they did in the beginning now, with a bit more nuance, a bit more tonal, sides to it. And hear the light guitar, kind of pluck guitar through it and all.
You might blame it on the system. It isn't hard to criticize. But the pain that you've been through, there's always something you can find.
The strings, the lushness seems to be filling out the verse much more with much more fullness this time. It's much more kind of present. And let's see where our narrator has which kind of thoughts are going through her head at this point in the song. You can't blame it on the system. It isn't hard to criticize, or on the pain that you've been through. There's always something you can find. I've been through all of this too often. I know. I thought I'd know how to react. Okay, that line I can, yeah, because I went in like thinking that I could turn this woman around, and just get, and it then just got to the point where like everything offended her, like everything triggered her, everything sent her down this like slippery slope of negative thinking. Her just neuroticism was too much, and she just made up reasons in her head to just get angry about everything, to think that everyone was out to get her, and But when it's someone saying they're my friend, I thought I'd seen the last of that. Okay, yeah. I can't really say. That I've been there in that line with maybe some other situations, not necessarily the one I was referring to, but yeah. Well, I've been my yeah. Let's just say people who um, say that they're your friend, or say that, or proclaim to love you, and yet at the same time are just trying to nitpick for fault and self-sabotage the relationship. Yeah. And I'm rocked to stony silence by the emptiness you bring to things that mean a lot to me, and it's happening once again. Okay, I'm reading a little bit ahead here.
I've been through all of this too often. I thought I know how to react when there's someone saying they're my friend. I thought I'd seen the last of them.
Yeah, that key change from E flat to B flat in this is like the most compelling. It's like the choice kind of like angular lift in these verses, and the way that her vocals hit those chords.
And I'm not too stony silence by the emptiness you bring.
That the key change right there, I guess, is like C7 to C to just regular C or C minor.
The things that mean a lot to me.
No, just C. I guess it's not C minor. Although
It's happening once again. I'm rocked to stony silence, 'cause our words they just sound the same. Too much for me to recognize, and nothing to begin.
Oh, hear the mournful tone as she stretches those syllables out on the final set of lyrics, and just knowing that she has to walk away from this situation and just leave him to his state of mind for the time being, because there's no way she can turn him around, and just sticking around will just kind of maybe bring her life down as well. You know, and that she hopes that one day maybe they'll meet again, and he'll be in a better frame of mind, and that maybe he'll recognize and appreciate the things, the positive vibes that she was trying to bring into his life, you know. Oh, such a heavenly, misty outro. It goes into that, it lifts up to that E flat one last time, and then drops to D minor, fades out with those misty strings, and that fading glow of the Fender. Glum, 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 glum. Yeah, the 70s had some of the most magical, mystical song fade outs. Yeah. Cado Belle with Rock to Stony Silence. Yeah, such a gripping metaphor. Like emotionally riveted, shocked almost by the disappointment of things going sideways or downhill in a communication so quickly, despite your own best intentions and care for this other person. Yeah. And just left with nothing to say. Knowing that there's nothing that you could say in the end that will turn this person around, or make them see the light, or make them see the good in you, or that you're trying to bring to that, you know. Because that person has a very self-destructive way of thinking. Yeah. And before that, Infamous Mister, one of the ultimate playa type songs, one of the ultimate narratives regarding a smooth talker, a player, a Casanova, a modern day James Bond, yeah, or a 70s era, really, a 70s era swinger, bar hopping guy, a perfect period piece, but with timeless recording quality and sense of melody and harmony and vocals, and yeah, the lovely voice of Maggie Reilly, who would go on to great things and be heard in many places. For more Rubies and Sapphires from the self-titled Cado Belle album, see the directory of albums by Scottish artists linked in the description below for red hot tracks and purples from this very ruby-packed album, one of the best of 1976, spoken from a man who has heard more than 1,740 albums from 1976 from around the world across numerous areas of music: jazz, rock, pop, soul, funk, R&B, yeah, you name it. As well as many other Scottish artists. And you can also go to the English M directory to see the Mike Oldfield discography, Ruby Mind, including the run of albums that she was on by him. Like and subscribe and follow me on social media, and leave a comment if there are any observations you have about the 2 tracks that we just heard: the layers, the arrangements, the lyrics, the metaphor-rich lyrics, I might say. Yeah, the lyrics to this album were written by Stuart, MacKillop, and Aladsair Robinson. Yes. Aladsair, I guess a non-performing lyricist for the. Stuart MacKillop, the keyboardist, and Aladsair. I don't know if he's in the photo. We got Colin Tully on saxophone, who I didn't introduce. Let's see, that brings us to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so Aladsair Robinson is a non-performing lyricist for the band. Yeah, kind of serving sort of a Betty Thatcher, Keith Reed, Pete Sinfield type of role for the band. Yeah, type of service for the band. And many other Scottish artists in the Scottish directory. And comment on any other observations, including the lovely voice of Meggy Riley. And until next time, this is Zaragon, the world's most air-traveled Trimaximalist, signing off.